Hello, Culture Matters podcast. We are back with another 30 days of thought. I continue to break down, break old assumptions, be challenged by the conflict, the interpersonal, not the interpersonal, the internal conflict, angst of having to record these thoughts, to be put in a position of vulnerability to share what I think of what I thought at one time. It's easy to procrastinate in this process. I'm hoping that my example is a reminder to you of not only what's possible putting out your thoughts, but how difficult it is and how easy it is to avoid or procrastinate. As Ben Franklin said, procrastination is the art of living in our yesterday, avoiding today, and destroying tomorrow. I have set out to increase the amount of output that our show provides to you on a daily basis. And it's truly breaking me down. And I hope that what comes out on the other side of this, the phoenix rises up and is a better version for me. I have to live with me more than you have to live with me, for my loved ones, and of course for you. And because as I evolve, the show is going to evolve, and ideally the content and the people that attract to this platform will improve, from a quality standpoint and a quantity standpoint, meaning more people will want to participate in this platform. And with all of that in mind, with the end in mind, part of the means of how to get there, in my estimation, is for me to actually do 30 days of thought, among, of course, the interviews and culture topics and other outlets of conversation around a value. But actually, for me to eat my own cooking, whether it's the CEO manual that you've been listening along with, or 30 days of thought. And all that to say, I feel, just sharing that all with you, less anxious about reading this 30 days of thought and sharing some of my thoughts on it today. So today we're on page 71. The title is Humans Shouldn't Be Cops. And here it is. The year is 2040, and humans shouldn't be cops. The brave one stands perched in a position of power. His hands brace the podium, his grip tight, and his knuckles white with vigor. He possesses feelings of anger, pain, and passion that courses through his veins. He speaks the word of a nation and says what the mass is thinking, but cannot speak. He says, rise up, raise your level of being, be open, be curious, be patient, be genuine, be loving, be good and just. Rise up, my brethren, but take a knee to enforcement. Calmness washes over the mass like a newborn, cleansed by their mother in their first bath. All sins become absolved. The citizens listen intently to understand and not to reply. However, something is not all there. The common communication takes place, the act of justifying jobs, positions, and engagements, which, if we are rising, we should be increasing our societal being. But it does not appear that way. Therefore, we must take aim at one of the forefathers of antiquated valor. This symbol is that of law enforcement. I, I dare say what all must he- I dare say what all must hear. Humans should not be cops. Policing, beating, enforcement of proper conduct, prosecution of peace. For we, the people, should be able to explore and be free. But the reasons above prevent that based on a human's interpretation of law enforcement. This is what keeps the cycle of hell juxtaposed to an ideal we call democracy. If we are to grow, to evolve, and dissolve the chains of primal man, we must rally to a cause and rise as our keepers' voices. We must fight a new and greater fight, that of the educated human. We must outsource our muscle to the non-organic and take heed of the coming signs of evolution. It is better for us to decide to love artificial intelligence because humans should not be cops. That's what robots are for. Any role, responsibility, or creed disempowering another man lowers that of the other man, the enforcer with fire in his eyes, a cycle of human disempowerment and a shackling of growth. Humans will not evolve this way. The abyss becomes a terrible and scary pattern. This pattern is one of force, hell, pride, and control. And the longer we stare into the abyss, the more likely it is to stare back at us, eventually owning us, as it has up to this point. We can prevent playing with this kind of fire, and we can start by not allowing humans to be cops. Call it blasphemous, cry for my persecution, and for the straitjacket of silence to befall this outcry, and do so in vain, because regardless of culture, technology heals all wounds, be it benign or malignant. I foreshadow this job of policemen and policewomen being replaced by artificial intelligence. If we want to evolve in finally being humans, humans should not be cops. Dedicated to those brave enough to enforce common law in a world not wise enough yet to be at peace. Thank you for your service. I would like to reiterate on that dedication out of fear of being misunderstood or, put in a box. Dedicated. So this excerpt is dedicated to those brave enough to enforce common law in a world not wise enough yet to be at peace. Thank you for your service. I mean that genuinely. Thank you for your service. If you participate in law enforcement and enable us citizens to not have to live in as much fear as we would if, absent your role. So thank you. There's so much to unpack in this call to action. And I'm going to start with my notes so my notes on the thought that this was written, years and years and years ago. I think one of the first things that comes to mind is how much technology's evolved in the last few years, to the point where in the next decade, they actually may have artificial intelligence monitoring our streets in the physical form as a more efficient mechanism to govern people. I mean, that we're already seeing just in the last couple of years since this was written. The AI in the sky in China. There was a recent event where robots were walking around, from Elon Musk saying he wants to have a robot in every home as an assistant for $20,000 or $30,000. Thinks it's the biggest product in history, that every human on earth will have a robot in their home helping them live their life. That's not a far cry from having artificial intelligence replace physical human beings as it relates to even low low resolution traffic cop or a ticket, meter guard, and so on and so forth. Obviously, as technology becomes more capable of, this is beyond my education, but let's say just capable of modeling, subcontext of human behavior. I would think a speculation would be the lesser complicated enforcement um, patterns or laws or rules, jurisdiction, whatever, could be handled by artificial intelligence. So the more and more complicated, like detective work and so on and so forth, would be handled by human beings trying to solve puzzles without all the puzzle pieces. And now that's not what this excerpt is about. This excerpt is about an idea. I'm going to read this note here. Law enforcement meets us at our lowest common denominator. How we engage with law enforcement reveals our values. So this is not an affront on people that participate as and have made livelihoods around sacrificing their lives to the betterment of others. That is an honorable thing. One of the things I'm speaking to, if only we were capable of, and this isn't an idea, governing ourselves in that way, or rising to the highest degree of our own personal responsibility, there'd be less of a need or no need in theory for another human being to sacrifice their livelihood, their time and their space to have to react to my irresponsibility or your irresponsibility. Someone that is breaking, let's use a simple thing like shoplifting. Maybe they're stealing food because they're hungry. Well, there are going to be consequences of that. And now someone that sacrificed their life for the betterment of the community to be a part of the law enforcement, let's say, who is a true patron of the culture, who is a high value person of integrity, now has to respond to someone that on their worst day stole a fruit. Let's say 364 days out of that year, they were a law abiding, great child, parent, sibling, citizen. And on that one day, in that one moment of weakness, they decided to steal food. There's always a story behind that. And now the person that has sacrificed, invested their livelihood in protecting the group is going to be confronted with, is going to confront that individual that for 360, this is just a thought experiment, but 364 days out of the year, they were the ideal citizen. And that one day, and that 1 hour, and that one moment, they decided to go against the fabric of the culture. And my, a thought within this is that these two parties who are potential for action, who are now an interaction, who are now engaging with one another, are they something, let's say that becomes a destructive engagement, you know, with fear and anger and resentment, and it could lead to the emotionality of one, the law enforcer confronting the lawbreaker. That is bound for conflict, and that conflict can very easily digress into physical conflict, from verbal and mental and emotional conflict on both parties. They're set up for failure. They're set up, and both are going to lose a part of who they are. The person that broke the law, they made a mistake in the judgment of the crowd, the group, of the society. They've already lost reputation, perspective, integration, perspective in the context of they lost the alignment within the company, within the community, within the culture. They're on an island on their own. They're marginalized by that decision. They have broken off from the group. They have chosen themselves over the group. they're a victim as well as the perpetrator. That's an idea that they're actually representing two dynamics that are opposing one another. One is the victim and one is the oppressor or the perpetrator. They've broken the law. They've committed an act against another person, and they simultaneously are now separate from the group. So they're marginalized. They're on the outside. And the question is, you know, what's the likelihood of them coming back into the group? You know, are they that action? Are they that mistake? Are they that law breaking? Or are they more than that? Are they, yeah, or are they more than that? And we don't know this answer because how do you, it's like, it's not like, you have an actuary table over how many people like in insurance are going to die in a year. So you're going to have a certain amount of insurance policies out, sell them, and have a certain amount of float to cover the tail, the risk, and you're still going to make a profit. You could use all these mathematical tables based on data to figure out what's your risk in insurance. How do you figure out if someone is redeemable or not? That's broken the law. How do you actually know if they, if right after that moment they regretted it or they aren't that thief, they're more than that. Kierkegaard once said, once you label me, you negate me. So now one of the things I'm arguing in this is that in theory, we have two victims. We're losing two people. We're losing two chess pieces for every time one sin is committed and law enforcement is responding. We're losing two souls. The perpetrator, who's simultaneously a victim to the culture. They're marginalized. They're on the outside. They're fired from the company. They lose their reputation. They lose their goodwill. They lose some degree their identity because their identity has a relationship with how accepted they are into the culture, into the everything, personal interpersonal relationships, family dynamics, uh, town, city, general culture. They're a criminal now. They're marginalized. Additionally, the person that's invested in the betterment of the group, this law enforcement individual, is sacrificing themselves for the betterment of the group because they're 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 responding to this malevolence that and think about the malevolence, the darkness, the separation of the individual from the group from, yeah, that maybe that isn't the person. Maybe it's something else that both parties are confronted. We're all confronted with that's actually separating both. And that's the darkness. The darkness has overcome the perpetrator, who's a victim relative to the light of the group, the redemptive qualities of the group, the potential creation of the group, the cooperation and the creative elements of the group. And this additional sacrifice of our culture is this other human being who's the cop, who's the guard, the protector of the culture that has to intervene. And they're losing their soul in the process of that intervention. We're sacrificing them for the betterment of the group. Even if it's a successful interaction, the fact that they have to react to the irresponsibility of the perpetrator undermines undermines them. So that's where the humans shouldn't be cops. Now, but then there's like a broader argument that uh, the ripple effect. Now that's if things go really well. Let's say that the interaction was not led to violence. It was calm and peaceful, and Now that person is arrested and they're put in through the system that is either going to, uh, ultimately, it's really on their shoulders if they're going to change, evolve, redeem themselves from that perpetrating something against the group, the community. It's not like our prison system is set up to help people become better human beings after they've made mistakes. Although that would probably be helpful, considering Nietzsche said that the tree that grows to heaven's roots go all the way down to hell. So the worst people in the world become priests, pastors, or criminals. It's another way we could go with this. Why? Well, they have a lot of skin in the game, and if you want to change your life for the better, having done the worst, there's a lot of energy wrapped up. There's a lot of emotion and pain, and it's like going from 0 to 100 or -100 to 100. There's more energy in the latter than the former. 200 versus 100. That's how I look at that mathematically. Um, Going from a negative to a positive takes more effort than going from just standstill to positive. There's more effort. So the something else I said that's in this idea humans shouldn't cops is, and we see this in our culture today. There's low trust for law enforcement. I think that's a consequence of trust, the low trust for the general culture, the lack of buy-in, the agreement on our values. Now, we don't need to agree on our values like we all agree on the values, but what we do have to implicitly agree upon is that we're going to tolerate to some degree uh, our opposing values so that we can talk and think through the problems that arise in the world. And a company that cannot talk and tell the truth without people fighting and attacking each other is going to be a failed company. A culture that the leaders of that culture cannot talk and disagree about the big ideas without attacking each other is going to diminish the trust between the average citizen and the the company, the culture. And one of the places we see that, one of the symptoms of that is a lower trust in law enforcement, a lower trust. So let's say, on one side, a group of people that align with one ideology don't trust the law enforcement. Another group of people don't trust those that are enforced. That's where you see that one political persuasion will have low trust for the ones that are enforced, and another side of the opposing or the antithetical side of the political spectrum ideology will have low trust for the institution itself as a symptom of low trust for the overall culture. And that low trust for the overall culture is a symptom of a diminished tolerance interpersonally on an individual level as it relates to talking and thinking and interacting on the big topics that create anxiety for us on an individual level. When our leaders start name calling and attacking one another and conspiring against one another and vocalizing that through speech, it sends signals below our awareness to not trust the culture, not trust the company. We don't believe in the company anymore because the leaders don't believe in each other. And so they're undermining whatever they say the company's vision is. This is what's happening in our country. That's what happens in cultures, like country cultures. And so one of the symptoms of a culture where the trust is going down as resentment is going up as a consequence of intolerant conversation and incompetent debate, um, is that law enforcement gets, like, the whole, law enforcement gets a bad rap. It becomes more, and it just kind of it starts getting worse and worse and worse, where the minority, like the marginal cases where it's the worst example of law enforcement, get highlighted, where people make grave mistakes and do bad things, and that that exacerbates the distrust on one side for those that are uh, perpetrating on the culture. These would be those in criminal persuasion, and then those enforcing the laws, whose aim is to protect the civilization. They become the enemy from one ideology, and on the other side, those that commit crime become uh, even more to blame as a symptom of that. And ultimately, there's truth on both sides, but it becomes false because the partial truth gets exacerbated to be the absolute truth on both sides, and that makes the whole argument on either side false. It's neither the aggression, or, let's say, break, you know it's not a conspiracy of the enforcers, and it's not a conspiracy of the perpetrators. It's actually, there are symptoms of the cultural misalignment, the lack of integration in the culture, the identity crisis of the culture. We're not acting out the activities, the rituals, the conversations, the communication necessary to lead a successful business. It isn't a right versus a left. It's a both, and how they feed back into each other and how they move into the future. And there's levels of disagreement and tribalism that are inherent in that those opposing ideologies, political persuasions. But when it goes too low, it's too below the belt. It totally decays the trust of the whole institution. No one, the employees, the customers, nobody believes in the company anymore. The employees being the citizens, the customers being I think the other countries in that analogy. So I could go on and on and on about this excerpt. I probably should stop, but there's a lot here. I'm going to come back to this in the future. Well, obviously, I'm going to come back to the book constantly. But there's a couple things. I'm saying that technology is going to replace that, and I'm less a Luddite, more of an excited idealist around technology. Because every time there's a bad situation between a law enforcement and those acting out the criminal spirit, that just puts more hate into the world. It lowers hope, and it creates more anxiety. So, it's, instead of us versus ourselves, it's us versus the robots. Probably better for the culture. That's something there. And then, of course, there's this general idea that the angst around enforcement is a symptom of the cultural misalignment of the actual country, which has to do with how we're communicating, which has a relationship with what our values are, and how we relate to the values that oppose our values. And it's like we're losing control of the car driving 140 miles an hour down the road. We're going to crash. And we've seen crashes and the bad things that have happened in and as it relates to enforcement and how they've been projected through media to further exacerbate disagreements. Anyway, we're working on 30 days of thought. Humans shouldn't be cops. Please continue to follow along. Pick up your book, read to think, write to develop, listen to hear what is unsaid, speak to let go, and I will see you next time in the Culture Matters podcast.